Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, how you doing? Welcome to November. Doesn't look too good to me at the moment, but whatever. November 1. The damn little trick-or-treaters didn't come in sufficient numbers, so I ended up, of course, ingesting horrible amounts of Reese's Cups, and my sister was right. The chocolate doesn't, and even the fillings, it doesn't taste like it used to. It tastes phony. Or maybe I just now have a more sophisticated palate. But man, that did not keep me from just. But I want to say one thing. In my encounter with a trick-or-treater who looked to be about maybe 10 or 11, because he was tall, he was sort of tall and thin, and he came with a group of about 5 kids, many of them younger. And, you know, as I greeted them and I had this basket full of candy, he said, "Oh, wow." And I turned to him and he said, I thought he was remarking on my choices of candy as being like really good, but that wasn't it. "Oh, wow," said the kid, dressed as Draco Malfoy. Yeah. "Oh, wow. What a beautiful basket." Or bowl, he said. And it is interesting and unusual, but how weird. That's what and he not only said it once, he said it 3 times. He tried to get the little kids to appreciate the beauty of my sort of basket bowl. It's a strange little foldable thing, but it is. "Look at that," he said. "Look at that." And then another kid comes running, and he turns to the kid, who looked to be about his age, a taller kid. He said, "Look at this basket." And I found that the weirdest, unexpected, wonderful encounter, that a trick-or-treater appreciated the beauty of the container in which the candy was placed. And all of them were very polite. Oh my God, they were so sweet. "Trick or treat," and "Thank you very much," and "Oh, thank you. Oh, so sweet you could eat them up." I'd been sort of sitting grumpily like the old grumpy lady on the street thinking, and when are they going to start bothering me by ringing the doorbell? And then they did. And I had nothing but I turned away from that encounter with that first group smiling, and it was good. All right, I suppose you want to talk about stuff in the news like terror attacks and indictments. But guess what? I don't. And here's why. It isn't because of yesterday, where we spent the whole hour talking about, what the heck did we talk about for the whole hour? What? I know it was one thing. What the hell was it? You see how pathetic my head is. Coconuts. What was it? It was Halloween. All right. Isn't it interesting growing old with me? All right. That's not why. Here's what I think. Especially about the indictments. I'm reading all this stuff about Manafort, about Papadopoulos, about, reactions, who did what, who said what, blah, 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 what Mueller's next move will be. By the way, how do you pronounce that name? Some people say Mueller. I've heard people say Mueller, and I've heard people say Miller. I think it's Mueller. Although I have seen people spell Mueller and say Miller, which, by the way, is my maiden name. For all I know, that's how it was spelled at one point. I don't know. Whatever, anyway. And what I'm thinking is, we are in such an early stage of all of this that I just want to pace myself, if you don't mind. I do not want to live and breathe with what Mueller does and then the immediate reaction of Republicans and the White House, because then they have us. Then we're just one of those millions stuck in that sort of gyre of, constant reaction to constant news. And I'm sick of it. And you know how I realized how I was totally sick of it? Yesterday afternoon, when the first reports came in about the terror attack in New York. And I ran to my TV, CNN, and put it on and was watching and got the first little bits and then found myself watching for about an hour. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, what are you doing? What the hell are you doing? Other than wasting time. Is there anything you can do to help anybody there? No. Do you have the basic facts? Yes. Will the basic facts come out continually? Are you just hearing the same stuff over and over again? What are you doing? I turned it off. I didn't watch anything all night. Not anything. I checked every once in a while to see if anything unusual had happened. But this sense we all have now, and I too, that we got to know right away, and then we got to react right away, and then we got to talk about it ad nauseum, and then we got to, and I mean, obviously I'm part of that. I've had a whole career as part of that. That's the fodder for my show, and always has been. But I don't think it's helpful in any way. I don't think it's constructive. I think it adds to this sense of anxiety that we all walk around with all of the time. I think it feeds into this ridiculous sense that we need to know and know now, rather than letting things settle and then trying to be thoughtful about whatever it is, not reactive. I don't think I can do it anymore. So I have nothing to say, frankly, at this point, about either of those stories. I'm aware that people are doing what they always do in these situations, blah, 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 looking for political gain, looking for political cover, trying to hurt enemies, trying to advance agendas, trying all of that. And you know what? I don't want to. A lot of innocent people who've been celebrating their high school reunion, are dead, others injured, traumatized. An MO that we know is hard to defend against and is being used globally and we'll see more of. And what is there to say? Huh? I don't want to jump into the craziness that Trump's trying to start up. I just don't want to. We all are fully aware of what he will attempt to do, how this is like a gift to him. Takes the news media's attention away from him for a moment, which actually at this point he might appreciate. I don't know. I guys have up to here. Just and if that's upsetting to you because you look to this hour as hashing out on a more personal level some of these stories, it's not that I'm not going to. It's just that I don't want to jump in right now. I'm not interested enough. I'm interested in silly little things that I've noted about how Manafort walked out of the federal courthouse the other day, and he was smiling. And I was thinking, what is going on in a person's mind? I suppose that was a bravado or something, because he's going to jail. He's going to jail. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's a crook. He's a tax evader. That much is clear. He's a money launderer. He's probably a liar. He's going to go to jail. It's like getting Al Capone, not for murdering people or for, bootlegging. It's on taxes. It's a great way of getting, he's applied for a pardon today. No, Manafort's asking Trump to pardon him already. Or else I'll sing. Was there something on the end of it like, pardon me, but would you please pardon me because, I got shit on you, buddy boy. Lots of shit. Could be. Let's let it play out. I'm just... Guys are going to jail. They're going to jail unless they get pardoned, which would create a whole other... wow. Why do we have to get ahead of it? Why do we have to run alongside of it, breathlessly? I'm sick of it. It's what Twitter does to us. It's what, breaking news. If I hear Wolf Blitzer say one more time, and we have breaking news, everything's breaking news. The pizza's arrived. Great, breaking news. Just shut up. Chuck writes, I'm with you. Thanks, Chuck. When news breaks, it's the same old format. News outlets race to be first with any tidbit of news, regardless of whether it's accurate or not. Yeah, because at the beginning of this one in New York, there was all kinds of false information being in the race to be won. And then they bring in talking heads for the round table or commentary. Then we get endless reports from people in the street. And then we regurgitate it all in the next hour of news. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Too much. Yeah. We owe ourselves to, as much as possible, not get pulled into that whirlpool, going round and round and round and round until our heads get so muddled we don't know if up is down or down is up, sort of like a ride at Kennywood. I can't do it. And I don't think it's good for my health. It's not like there's not other things we can talk. I have other things here, and some of them are serious. For instance, one of the things when Susan and I yesterday went off on all that Halloween talk, and you aided and abetted in that, I had wanted to talk about General Kelly and his wonderful comments about the Civil War, but I intend to do that today. We do have a caller, however. Hello, caller. Hello.
Hey, Lynn, it's Mike in D.C.
Hi, Mike.
So I called to talk about how Mueller says his last name, but before I do, I just wanted to talk about or mention that he can't be pardoned until he's been convicted.
Is that true?
You can't pardon someone for something. I'm pretty sure that's true. How can you pardon
Well,
someone
now wait,
for...
though. Wait. Didn't Gerald Ford pardon Richard Nixon? before he was charged.
Okay, I'm not an attorney. We should have asked Susan yesterday. But I called to talk about Mueller's name and how you say it. The only way you really know how a name is pronounced is by hearing someone say it.
Is by hearing him say.
Cullen, if you wanted.
Yes, but I want to hear him say. How does he pronounce his name? I've never heard him say it.
I know. I put on YouTube Mueller, prosecutor, and trying to find it, and I couldn't find it.
Really?
But, he could pronounce it any way he wants. Like, you could pronounce it Cullen if you wanted.
Cullen, yes.
Like Boehner. How does he get Boehner out of this?
Because he didn't want to walk around with a name of Boner.
Right.
Wouldn't that be it?
So I think that's...
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, it's the same with Miller, Mueller, all that stuff.
The funniest name pronunciation thing, and I've told the story before, but when I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, I had a friend who was in medical school, and her name was Bobby Cates. And then I saw how it was spelled once. I mean, if I said her name was Bobby Cates, how do you think Cates is spelled?
Cates?
I would have said Cates. Cates. That's how I've seen Kate spelled. And then I saw how she spelled her name. And it was Katz. And I got news for you. And I had news for her. I said, Bobby, that ain't Kate's. That's Cats. I'm sorry, Katz is Cats, okay? Now, so clearly what that was is someone in her family at some point didn't change the name, but decided to change the pronunciation so that it didn't sound Jewish. Cats is a Jewish name. Kate's is not. But if you're going to go that route, I would say then don't spell it Katz. That's just me.
How many names are changed that we don't think of Jewish names that have been, there was a Stein at the end of it, eventually, somewhere down the line?
Oh, I think, a ton of Jewish names have been altered. People wanting to get ahead in almost any profession in the 20th century, especially early in the 20th century, had rough going if they didn't change a blatantly Jewish name. Not that always worked. But now because of this wonderful melting pot of America, there are people walking around with very Jewish names who aren't Jewish. There was a football game on the other day, and I swear to God, there was a black player who was fantastic, and his name was Cohen. Well, I'm sorry. You can't. Cohen is like the uber Jewish name. That is because it means high priest. The Kohanim were the high priests. They were way up there. And so Cohens have some bragging rights if your name is Cohen. But I never saw a black professional football player named Cohen. I freaked when I heard, and Cohen has the ball. Cohen's running. I thought, what?
Jews aren't good at sports.
No, I know. And hands off to Rosenberg, who laterals to Goldstein. No, you don't hear that. Excuse me.
So the name thing is interesting because each person gets to choose how they want to say it. And you're right. You do have to hear them say it first.
Yeah, you do.
So.
Oh, here's the
but
part.
If you're going to switch your name from Rosenberg to Rosen, why wouldn't you just switch it to Smith or Peterson?
Well, I'll tell you.
Some other total name.
Listen to this. In my own family, my mother's maiden name is Ross, Ross. I think of Ross as probably a Scottish name or an Irish name or something like that. But somebody in her dad's, I think it went just 2 generations back, changed their name from, it was Rosen something, Rosenberg, Rosenstein, and made it Ross. So
why don't they just change it to Smith or Peterson or Jones? If you're going to change it all.
Yeah, but Ross kept the ROS, kept it sort of like it was, but took the Jewishness out of it. If you were trying to have a go at being an American, that was what people did. Not everybody, obviously.
Was there shame in trying to change it?
I have no idea. That I don't know. I think...
Or judgment?
I'm very judgmental, so I appreciate people who didn't and am more critical of people who did, but who am I to say? I mean, if you wanted to get into, like my grandfather, if he wanted to get into dental school, maybe it was easier if his name was Ross. I don't know.
Or maybe it wasn't even easy. Maybe it was a sign, we don't accept Jews.
Yeah.
And what are they going to do? How are they going to prove that you are or aren't?
Yeah. But, but as I said, I mean, there's some of the most Jewish-looking people I know walking around with Jewish-sounding names. I mean, something Stein, something Berg. And they say, I'm not Jewish. Because they have the name, but somewhere the religion got lost. But you look at them and you hear their name, and I always say to them, I'm sorry, you might say you're not Jewish, but your face, your name, everything screams, Jew! You're a Jew! I look at you and I see a cousin. That's what I'm saying. So, hey, this just in. Here is Gerald Ford's pardon. Now, therefore, I, Gerald R. Ford, President of the United States, pursuant to the pardon power conferred upon me by Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, have granted, and by these presents do grant, a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon, for all offenses against the United States which he, Richard Nixon, has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 20th, 1969 through August 9th, 1974. He pardoned him for anything he might have done.
Well, Trump's going to have to make that years a lot longer for Manafort. And did you hear how they're going to get him even with the pardon?
Yeah, because the states,
right.
He can't get him on state charges for failing to file properly. Yeah, he's screwed.
We're working closely with the general counsel for New York.
Yes.
Where he broke most of the laws.
Right, exactly. So New York will get him. Hey, thanks. Appreciate the call.
You're welcome.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Kathy writes, because I said, I hope you aren't upset if I don't want to be talking about all the obvious stories. She says, what you have said so far is the furthest from upsetting to me. It's validating. It's refreshing. I have periods where I have to step away from the news cycle, and I have friends who are shocked by that. Don't you want to know what's going on? They say. As if we have to know everything right away, sometimes even before the facts are in. I blame our instant society and the ego's need to be the first to know something. I'm tired, and like you, I've had it up to here. Thanks for so eloquently putting into words how I've been feeling. Well, you are welcome, Kathy. Yeah. I know. So let's... Okay. So I just want to... I want to point out, because Kelly now, to me, is a frightening figure. In part because we were misled about him by the gushing media, right? I'm talking about General Kelly, the former head of Homeland Security, who then became Trump's main man. Can't think of his title. And so he said in this interview, right, I'll get the quote exactly right. Chief of Staff, thank you. In a little while, Stephen, you'll probably write on your little board, Lynn Cullen. Your name is Lynn Cullen. You are doing a show right now. Thank you. I don't know where I'd be without Stephen here. Okay, so Kelly, the Chief of Staff, or the right-hand man, right, said it was the lack of an ability to compromise that led to the Civil War. This is a guy who does not know his history, obviously. I mean, there were compromises up the wazoo heading into the Civil War. In fact, let's go back to our brilliant founding fathers and their desire to create a nation out of these disparate states with their disparate economies and values. And the only way they could possibly get a country together was for the Northerners to compromise with the Southerners. And oh, did they. It's in stone in the Constitution of the United States, where the compromise was that these black people brought here against their will and kept in chains and enslaved and forced to do unbelievable labor for which they received nothing, but for their owners, great wealth, and for the Confederacy, great wealth. It was declared that they, of course, would not be considered fully human. Literally, not fully human. Our wonderful founding fathers who we worship, right? In fact, it is right there in the Constitution of our United States that they should, in fact, count as 3/5 of a person. So, that was a compromise. And all of the compromises that were made up to the point where there were none left to make were about slavery. It was always about slavery. And anybody who doesn't know that needs to go back to, I don't know, I think I learned that in 4th grade, right? Go back to 4th grade, General F. Kelly, and learn about the Missouri Compromise. Learn about the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Learn about how Abe Lincoln, before he became president, was saying, well, I mean, he was willing to let whatever he was trying, he would have compromised and compromised some more. It was the Southerners, it was the Confederacy, it was the slave owners who refused time and time again to any compromise, because any further compromise would deprive them of their workers. Because think of owning a business or being rich because you had workers who you didn't have to pay. That's like a big expense, when people do business. Yeah, you had to kind of feed them enough so that they can continue to do the work. A failure to compromise. Jesus H. Here's one historian. When it comes to the Civil War, we still can't seem to understand that the politics of compromise right up to the Civil War, I'm adding a little bit, was a politics of appeasement to the slave owners, appeasement to the slave owners, where we sacrificed black freedom and rights. That was always the compromise. Okay, Missouri, all right, you can enslave those 3/5 of humans. A refusal to compromise. There was no more compromise to be had, and thus a war. And the fact that after that war, we still refused to come to terms with what the war was about. Where did I read that Woodrow Wilson, who was a racist of all races, he was an unbelievable racist. Woodrow Wilson was at a big shindig at Gettysburg, I believe, where veterans from both sides came together. You've probably seen pictures of these men dressed in their uniforms, the gray and the blue, and holding hands or having their arms around each other. And Wilson made a big deal at that as the president of saying both sides were honorable men fighting for honorable principles. He said it. Both sides were honorable. And the word slavery was never mentioned. The white folks who ran things just wanted to get ahead. Go on. Can we start? Just move forward. So let's put this behind them. The South was honorable. That's how, now Robert E. Lee could be called an honorable man, even though he was a traitor. And generations and generations and generations of Americans have been schooled incorrectly. So no wonder we're now in the 21st century. And generals, 4-star generals, who you would think would have learned American history maybe at some point, are confused about what that most horrific war was about. I also want to point out something else in that interview that Kelly, the despicable General Kelly, no, he's not the adult in the room. He is a total Trumpite. Total. He obviously signed on because he agrees with Trump. And now we know he's an unschooled, probably racist, okay? Also, in that interview, it came up about what he had said about Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who, of course, he slandered, and who he also accused of having made statements and behaved in a despicable manner at some event that he had attended, and then the video pops up of the event, and it totally shows that everything he said was a lie. He has been asked to apologize to her. And during that interview, he said this: absolutely not. I stand by my comments. So, he's Trumpian. Video exists saying that your comments are shit. They're false. They're defamatory. I stand by my comments. So don't get flummoxed because he looks like an honorable man, right? He looks like an honorable man.
He's got good posture. He's got that sort of rugged-looking face. And when he speaks, he sounds, well, eloquent. But it's gibberish. It's hateful lies. And he has no character of any note. Because for him to say, I stand by my comments, shows he is just a liar. He is no better than his boss. He is not the adult in the room. He's Donald's playmate, apparently. Don't be calling him something special around me, because he is disgusting. Mark writes, maybe Sarah's eyelashes had something to do with Halloween. This is in reference to something Susan said, right? I can't look at the woman, so I don't know about her eyelashes. Trump is going to step up extreme vetting. Yeah, I noted this too. Is there such a thing as super extreme? Isn't it? Okay, if something is extreme vetting, how do you go up a notch? What's higher? What's the adjective that trumps extreme? Mega extremo vetting. It reminds me of one of my brother's favorite sports stories, and I'm sorry I can't give the guy's name because I have in the years forgotten it, if not my own. It was a Dallas Cowboy. It was a long time ago, and he was known for not speaking to the media. He was a good player, but he just wanted to play. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk. Never talked. But prior to the Super Bowl, the mics are out, and he was asked breathlessly a question, what's it feel like to play in the ultimate sporting event? And he says, well, I forgot the quote. If this is the ultimate sporting event, then what are we going to do next year? Here was a guy who never talked, who understood the definition of words. And he understood that if you called this, the game he was about to play, the ultimate game, that there were no other games. that was it. Well, if that is the ultimate event, then what am I going to be playing next year? Yeah, we're stepping up that ultimate, and we're stepping up that extreme. We're stepping them all up. We're going up so high, you won't even be able to see. Oh, I've been given a Wilson speech transcript. I think I did a fair rendering of it, but I'll look it up later. Okay, so one of the things we. Oh, wait. Let me go here first, because speaking of black people being written into our Constitution as 3/5 of a human being. What were Native Americans? They didn't even get any ink at all. They didn't get anything. They were just... And I'm reminded of this because a Native American who was responsible, at least in my lifetime, for tapping America on the shoulder, or you could say hitting it upside the head with a 2x4, woke America up, at least parts of America, to the outrage of what had happened to Native Americans. We didn't learn about it. We're the good guys. When we learned our history, it wasn't that we were like genocidal or ripping people apart, taking them off their lands, force marching them till they died, making them resettle and play. We didn't talk about that in school because schools are meant to indoctrinate us so that we know we're the greatest, right? So in the tumult of the late 60s and early 70s, there were two Native Americans who we all got to know. One was named Dennis Banks, and the other, Russell Means. I had the hots for Russell Means, I have to tell you. Oh, man. Russell Means once led a 6-day takeover of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington. Some Indians, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they thought, well, I think Indians should be in charge, and they flat out took it over. And it turned into I can't remember how long, a 6-day standoff where they held the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And it was successful in that it got media attention. It's what marginalized people do to get attention. And so media talked to them. Why are you doing this outrageous thing? And they started to explain the grievance of the Native American. They started educating Americans about the reality of their history. And it was successful in that the government did agree to re-evaluate certain treaties and agreed to discuss government actions regarding the Indians. Dennis Banks also mounted an occupation of an entire town. This was in 1973, I think. He and I believe Dennis Banks and a bunch of others took over the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota. Wounded Knee, South Dakota. It was located on a reservation. It was the Pine Ridge Reservation, and Wounded Knee was the site of probably the last massacre of Native Americans by the government of the United States of America. 350 men, women, and children, Lakota, were massacred by U.S. military at Wounded Knee. This is in 1890, okay? So Banks and Means and other activists took over again so that they could teach America. They were surrounded by 300 heavily armed U.S. Marshals, FBI, law enforcement officials, armored cars, heavy weapons. A 10-week siege. A 10-week siege. But Americans started waking up. I know this one did. I started to learn. They were smart. They understood how to attract media and then how to get their story out. Actually, the first thing they did was brilliant. In 1970, on Thanksgiving Day, perfect timing, they boarded the Mayflower II, which is a replica of the Mayflower that was, I I don't know where it was. Was it in Boston or in Plymouth? Wherever it was, they boarded it and essentially had a little battle of sorts, a confrontation between them, the Indians, the Native Americans, and these people dressed up as pilgrims who were on board to celebrate Thanksgiving, at least the American version of that story. And can you imagine? So they're all dolled up, doing their, with their buckles on their shoes and their roasted turkeys, and they're all of a sudden some real Indians show up. That was the first thing they did. And Banks later said, "We were the prophets, we were the messengers, we were the fire starters." All true. He spent time in jail. He came out, and the feds went after him again. And he was supposed to report to jail. I forget exactly how this happened. And he ran off to California and asked the governor of California to grant him asylum. And the governor of California, Jerry Brown, did just that. Yeah, he's the governor now, too. He is. So a younger Governor Jerry Brown said to Dennis Banks, yes, I grant you asylum, and refused to let any other state law enforcement come at him. But then a Republican became governor of California. And the minute the Republican came in, Dennis Banks took off because he knew damn well the Republican was going to turn him over. The Republican, by the way, was a guy named Duke Magian. This is right before Reagan becomes governor. Soon. Then he runs to a reservation in New York State, and lo and behold, New York State also granted him asylum. But by 1984, he just felt trapped, and he decided, I'm coming out. And he went to jail again. And spent almost 2 years. But I bring this up because, the times we live in now are so fraught and so frightening. And they provide opportunities for us to learn. And in the 70s, those early 70s and late 60s, believe me, those were frightening times too. There were terrorist attacks then as well. There were these kinds of things, takeovers and sieges and efforts for groups who had been screwed, okay? Screwed royally by the American government to get some acknowledgement of that and then perhaps redress of their grievances. Dennis Banks, by most accounts, I think most Americans at the time thought of him as a terrorist. When he was 5, he was taken away from his family. And he was sent to a government school. You've heard of those now, right? We're aware of those now. I know Canada right now is trying nationally to come to terms with what they did to their Native Americans as well. Sent to government schools, big one in Carlisle, PA, where they're buried. There's so many Native Americans buried there who died there as they were transformed from the beautiful warriors of their culture to these respectable, I guess, Americans, I don't know. At these schools, his culture was denigrated. He was not allowed to speak his own language. These schools were about destroying all memory for these young Native Americans of their culture, their identity. That's where he spent his youth. He ran away at 17. I bring this up because Dennis Banks died. So that was his obit. Not a great picture of him. Dennis Banks. I love this part. His survivors. 19 children. More than 100 grandchildren. Okay. Mark, what happened? This happened because I was reading your email and I went off on a tangent, obviously. I'll go back to Mark's email. You're right, John Kelly lacks integrity. He lies about Congresswoman Wilson. Showed me his racist inclinations. He had no idea of her prior good works. He simply made a judgment based on her appearance. Right. What's that thing with that hat? What's she doing wearing that hat? God, these black people, what is with them? It's just racist, right? There were many issues in the Civil War, but slavery was the cause. The compromise was what percentage of 100 should a Negro be counted? Some compromise in a land where all men supposedly were created equal? Yeah, right. Huh? I mean, right there you got some serious cognitive dissonance that all those genius founding fathers managed to avoid. Mark also writes, Manafort would have gotten away with getting millions without paying if he had not become Trump's chairman. That's true, probably. The Russia collusion thing is what got him caught. Maybe we have an IRS problem. By the way, Manafort has 3 passports. I know. How is that possible? With 3 different numbers. Yeah, that's interesting. He's a crook. He's a slime. Denise writes, from Kelly's interview about Robert E. Lee and the Civil War, this is a quote, men and women of good faith on both sides made that stand where their conscience had them make their stand. This is exactly the same thing his boss, Trump, said about the KKK in Charlottesville, right? Good people on both sides. People of conscience. Nazis. Racists. They're just good, principled people who have a different perspective. Denise says, remember when Bill Maher, got into some serious trouble when he made a similar argument about the 9/11 terrorists? What he said was they were being called this cowardly act. And Maher said what, in fact, I understand. He was going by what words mean. And he was saying, I don't think it's cowardly, to know you're going to die, to kill yourself to make a political statement. I think that's not a coward. So he was saying that's the wrong word. Yeah, it's the wrong word. And I think he can make a strong case for what he said. But, of course, he lost his job at the time. I got another little thing here. I got so many things here, and I don't. And as you know, I'm somewhat. I have a quote from Henry Kissinger. I came upon it while reading a book review, but I sure as hell got to share it with you. He was being interviewed by a beautiful woman, a journalist. And Henry was, he liked the beautiful women. And he was rumored to be a real hot commodity. Can you imagine that little toad? But he was famous for saying that power is the greatest aphrodisiac. If you're a powerful man, you can have any babe you want. Seems to me that's what Donald Trump was saying, too, in the tape, right? So Henry Kissinger is being interviewed by this woman. This would be in the 70s again, early 70s, and he said this to her because he started humble bragging about, all this stuff about me being a ladies' man. Well, I don't know. I know I have that reputation. And then he said this. This is the quote. For me, women are only a diversion, a hobby. Nobody spends too much time with his hobby. That's how Henry Kissinger, who's considered a great man by many, talks and thought about women. Still does, I'm sure. Women are a diversion, a hobby. When I need them, I got them, but then, you got to get on. And that he said this to the woman he said it to shows that he was also not as smart as they like to think he is. Because he said it to an Italian journalist named Oriana Fallaci. I don't know that she was the most recognized female journalist in the 70s. She was famous because she was sort of ruthless. She would interview people and eviscerate them. She would ask, here's one. This just shows, I want to tell you something about her, Oriana Fallaci, because she ended up with very few people liking her. She was a self-promoter, there's no doubt about it. She's smart as a whip and fearless. And she would ask people questions that would knock them off their... she was brilliant as an interviewer because she would always ask them a question that there was really no comfortable way to answer, such as interviewing Yasser Arafat. In the course of the interview, she all of a sudden just said to him, so how many Israelis do you think you've killed up to this date? Now stop and think about that question. How's he supposed to answer that? Is he keeping count? It's little questions like that. By the way, the story she wrote about Kissinger was brutal. The story she wrote about Arafat was brutal. She went to interview Lech Walesa when he was the hero of all heroes with his solidarity and uprising of the union workers and anti-communist hero. And here's what she said about him. She said, he struck me as a vain, presumptuous man, a bigot, with a certain air of proto-fascism about him. And you know what? I think he's proven that out. Is he still around? I don't know. But yeah, I did not look at him kindly after a while. And he is a bigot. He's an incredible anti-Semite, I'll tell you that. So she was always anyway. But man, I thought that that quote from Kissinger was mind-blowing. What happened to my... All right. So I don't know how to use my I just want to see if you've got any. Okay, one more. Okay, come on here. I think we're almost done, but I just want to get Dorothea in here. Lynn, she says. Lynn, she says. But my computer is frozen. Lynn, Kelly, Trump's cabinet, and of course the Trump voters, all of them want this country to be different than what it is. If we've learned anything from this past year, the vision of the Republican Party does not include minorities. They believe the Confederates had the right idea. We cannot forget this at this time next year. We can't forget it any time. Yeah. I do think they want things the way they used to be, where white guys got to run everything, right? Okay, you. I think I'm done. I did see that the clock we're actually a little late. And thank you very much. And I'll see ya tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.